So, this is the third talk on the theme of oneself, and began Monday with the topic of self-respect. And perhaps self-respect is maybe sometimes easier to come to than self-love or self-compassion, but to have a deep respect. And what we respect, maybe we try to understand it better. We make ourselves available to know it better. And so yesterday was a topic of self-understanding, to really understand this person that we are, what drives us, what attitudes, beliefs, attachments, desires, and aversions we have, and how we understand ourselves so that we can be free. And today the topic is not harming oneself. And I find that this idea of non-harming and not harming others, not harming ourselves, is such a profound topic that it's easy to eclipse that topic with more inspiring topics of the Dharma or spirituality. It's inspiring, the idea of love and compassion, generosity. It's inspiring wisdom. It's inspiring the idea of freedom. And but it's also possible to be focused on those and not really understand the nature of harm, nature of the way the mind works, the heart works, that we're harming ourselves, and maybe in ways that we harm others, both out of impulsive speech and action that we never would have consciously planned to want to do, but it just blurts out of us. But also in kind of subconscious ways that we're not really aware that how we're speaking in a way to kind of poke someone or express our hostility or be a little bit mean to someone. And so to value non-harming as a foundation, and to appreciate that non-harming is a profound topic because it applies to so many areas. To live a life without harm, self-harm and harming others, is a phenomenal life. It's really a good life. And people learn to trust us, we can trust ourselves, we can go anywhere we want without having to feel self-conscious that we're causing harm. And it's the foundation for a peaceful life, peaceful world. So, not harming oneself. There is this verse in the suttas. The Buddha says, traveling in all directions with one's thoughts. Nowhere can one find anyone dearer than oneself. In the same way, to each individual, the self is most dear. Oneself is most dear. Therefore, whoever loves oneself must, whatever loves oneself most doesn't harm others. So sometimes this idea of, holding oneself dear, valuable, holding oneself as being precious and is maybe seen as being selfish. But there's a way in which it's not. And one way is that the more we have respect and care and appreciate and value for ourselves, and value, see the value of not being harmed by anyone, not be suffering, not having no one steal or lie or attack us or anything, and know that we can appreciate that's true for other people as well. Allow them to be the person who's most precious to themselves. And imagine that they also do not want to be harmed. And this combination of seeing oneself as being valuable and that translating to not causing harm and caring for others is one of the wonderful principles of Buddhism. And so and then there's a particular verse in the Dhammapada that can be quite challenging to read or to deal with. So it begins with something maybe that's not so difficult. It says, don't give up your own welfare. Don't give up your own welfare. But the next line says, don't give up your own welfare for the sake of others' welfare, however great. And the idea that you wouldn't sacrifice yourself, your welfare for the welfare of your children or your neighbors or people you know or people who are suffering more than you, goes against the grain for many people I know. But I think that as we understand ourselves deeply, it isn't that we're trying to be comfortable. It isn't that we're not trying to, but that we have access to an inner sense of peace, an inner sense of non-harming. We don't harm ourselves through anger, contraction, attachments, expectations, bias, all kinds of ways which we harm ourselves. That's where the real welfare is. The real welfare, the profound welfare, is how we keep the heart at peace, happy, contented, even if we're uncomfortable. So don't give up that welfare for someone else's welfare. But that doesn't mean don't benefit others, don't do things for others. Just don't sacrifice what's greatest and beautiful in yourself for that. Keep that and help others. So if a neighbor, for example, has an emergency and you haven't eaten, and for your welfare you should eat, otherwise you'll get a headache maybe. But your neighbor needs to get to the emergency immediately. So of course I would hope you would sacrifice your meal and sacrifice the absence of a headache to save the life of your neighbor. But in doing so, you don't have to sacrifice your heart. You don't have to give away your peace or you don't have to get agitated or contracted or something. And that is where self-understanding is so important, to really understand deeply where the refuge is within, how we hold ourselves in safety in our hearts by not getting caught in our attachments. So to not harm ourselves requires a lot of self-understanding, a lot of sitting quietly and still, or any kind of way to really get underneath the surface of how we think, the surface layer of our desires, our wishes, our preoccupations, concerns. Still to this day, I can be in the labyrinth of my concerns and thoughts. What should we do? What happens here? And I have a lot to do, and I have to figure this out. And it's a labyrinth that I call a labyrinth because sometimes there's no way to get out of it on its own terms. But if I sit and meditate, then I'll drop down into a deeper place of knowing, a deeper understanding, a deeper way of thinking that's not in a labyrinth of superficial thoughts or surface thoughts, that preoccupations where I'm kind of lost in them. And then from that deeper place, then there's no labyrinth. Then, now I understand myself and what needs to happen and what the priorities should be. So this ability to know oneself by dropping below the surface chatter of the mind and really feel deeply what's happening in the heart, in the body, in the mind, and eventually discovering, understanding the little movements or the big movements that we have within of harming ourselves, of being mean to ourselves, or being judgmental, or being in conflict with ourselves, or getting caught in desires which, and maybe even pursuing them, desires which will come back and harm us if we pursue them. There's some desires, some addictive desires, for example, The addiction, it might bring pleasure in the short term, but can ruin a life in the long term. Certain desires we pursue, and in the short term they're pleasant, but in the long term they cause problems. If we, if we overeat, it's pleasant, but then we have, we're groggy afterwards, perhaps. Or if we have an affair because it's pleasant to do, then afterwards we realize how much harm that has caused to other people. So this idea of, understanding deeply how we get caught in desires, how we get caught in cravings and judgments and all this, and learning how to give ourselves a phenomenal break, learning that there's no need to be caught in the grip of desires, no need to be caught in the grip of hostility towards ourselves. There is this place of respect deeply within, where it's okay to relax. It's okay to just be. It's okay to be here just breathing below the surface level, below the chatter and below the desire and hostility level. That's just a level. That's just a labyrinth we get caught in. But to sit quietly, learn to let go and quiet the mind and the thoughts and drop down to this place that's deeper. And the deeper calm we can experience, the more we'll understand ourselves, understand when the little impulses arise, even the slightest one that involves self-harm, has an ouch in it. And then we learn, no, I don't have to do that. I can let go of that. So practicing non-self-harm, partly because we cherish ourselves, we value ourselves, and partly because it's just so painful to harm ourselves. And then knowing that discovering the well springs of non-harming within is a foundation for caring for the world, caring for others. We come into the world, we meet others in a very different way if we have learned the art, learned the skill, learned the capacity to minimize and eventually hopefully stop how we bring about self-harm. Then we don't sacrifice that absence of self-harm, don't sacrifice that peace, but it's a foundation from which to meet others, care for others, and care for the world. And that can be done tirelessly. That can be done with tremendous dedication. So this quote, don't give up your own welfare for the sake of others' welfare, however great. Yes, don't do that. But if you don't do that, maybe you'll have a lot more energy to care for the people in your lives, known, unknown, and throughout the whole world. So, not harming oneself. Thank you.